I just want you to start maybe by describing a little bit of your journey in audiology so far.
Yeah, no problem. So I have been an audiologist now for 8 years. We actually graduated together, didn't we?
We did, yes.
So
Full disclaimer. We've known each other through the good and the bad.
yeah, we definitely have. And so as soon as I graduated, I went into locuming as a audiologist, and then I went and spent some time doing some voluntary work, partly as an audiologist, partly just as a youth worker. And then I came back and decided I was going to become a pediatric audiologist. So I was a pediatric audiologist up until 2017, when I then became a sales manager for a hearing aid manufacturer. And then a year ago, I decided that I wanted to do my master's in public health. So I have just finished my master's in public health. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey.
And this is kind of why I wanted to talk to you, because it's so easy for us to see each of these areas of audiology and healthcare as being very discrete, but they're all really connected. And so we were talking about an incident earlier that you felt had really shaped your communication style kind of across all these different areas of work. So do you want to speak a little bit about that particular incident now?
Yeah, the incident happened when I was, early on in my career as a pediatric audiologist. The department that I worked in at the time was an absolutely brilliant department in terms of training, in terms of us working as a team. It was a great learning experience, but this child will always stick with me because I would say because I was junior at the time, and it was one of the first children that I was working with that had more complex needs. And often in peds, we do work as we work collaboratively, but sometimes because of all the complex needs that a child requires, they may be seen by consultants in different hospitals. So actually, this child was being seen by two different audiology clinical departments. And so we were doing VRA. We had to modify the VRA greatly because the child was partially sighted, and we just had to make sure that we were, we had set a scene for VRA where we could be confident that their responses were true. And so, long story short, the results that we picked up from VRA were different to the ABR results and the following VRA results that had been picked up by the other department.
So two departments, two different outcomes.
Two different incomplete results as well, say that, which often can be the case when you're seeing, children with, with complex needs. It takes several appointments to build the full picture. And so knowing that, we were very much, when we got our results, well, we're wrong here, we could be wrong here. And so we, did a second, repeat testing as soon as was possible, and actually had, picked up repeating results again. They were consistent with what we had found the first time round. And so at that point, when you're dealing with a young child, essentially an infant who has already been aided and is being under-aided, and a mother who is dealing with so much, whether you start to play into who do we blame here, whether you start to look at, okay, actually, how do we make sure that we are doing the best for this child? That is dictated, well, what I observed and what I felt was that the clinicians had such a role in dictating how this evolved. My colleague that I was working with, from the beginning, we were very much transparent with the other department. We communicated with them. We found these results. This was the approach to our testing that we took. And so very much from early on, we weren't looking to blame the other team at all. we were actually thinking, look, we could be the ones that haven't got the correct results here. And the way that we communicated with the parent was also just in being transparent with what we found,
Yeah.
and being very open with, the parent about the fact that hearing testing can take time
Mm-hmm.
to build the full picture. And sometimes if you're coming off the back of an ABR, it's not necessarily going to be as accurate, like
Yeah, it's complex. So
yeah,
it's one of those situations
exactly.
where, like, you're in a really difficult scenario because none of you have the full picture of what's going on. You have a parent who's quite understandably
Frustrated.
frustrated,
Yeah.
feeling perhaps, feeling overwhelmed by the situation and kind of also just wanting a clear resolution where none of you are able to give it. And in that situation, as you described, it's super easy to kind of try and say, okay, well, the other person's wrong, we're right, to become confrontational and also to become quite defensive with the parent.
Mm-hmm.
It's very instinctive, right?
Yeah.
So particularly because you were quite early on in your career, how did you feel at the time, and what was it that kind of, what determined the outcome for you in this situation?
The way that we worked in that department was, we definitely worked in pairs. We worked as a team. And even though I was junior in the team, I was still given a lot of responsibility. And so one of the biggest learnings was from my colleague that I was working from, and she just approached everything so calmly.
Mm-hmm.
She was so calm, she was so rational, and that openness with the parent and also with the other clinical team, and sharing our learnings as to this is what we did, this is when we got the strongest responses from the child that we believe to be true. Perhaps you guys should try this, when it comes to, when the child is seeing the consultant and you're looking to do the VRA again, So the fact that she was just so open about sharing what we did, the positives and the negatives of our approach, meant that ultimately the outcome for the child was the best outcome, because we were able to build the fullest picture and we were able to appropriately aid the child. And I think because the parent could see, how invested we were, how open we were, and the parent was with us along the journey, it meant that actually she didn't feel as frustrated as she did in the beginning, perhaps. The communication had not been as clear, and when she felt that the needs of her child were not being met. And I would say that that's definitely just filtered down into the way that I work even outside of the clinical roles that I've done, which that be open, put your hands up to your mistakes, share your approach, the positives of your approach, share the negatives as well, because often sometimes what we may perceive to be a negative, somebody else may see as a strength in the way that you've approached something or in the way that you're working. So that transparency is key. That transparency is really key.